Hello. We're all familiar with the expression, desperate times call for desperate measures. We might feel that it was invented for such a time as this, when there are restrictions on our daily lives such as haven't been seen in peacetime before now. But the book of Ruth shows Naomi leaving home for a foreign land because of a famine, being bereaved by the death of her husband and 2 sons, and then returning to find others bringing in the harvest while her own land presumably hadn't been tended, so there was no harvest there to be had. So now she is a widow with no means and a Moabite daughter-in-law in tow. For Naomi, these were desperate times. The times that lead desperate people to perform desperate actions. But what actions? Our passage today is ambiguous in a number of ways, making it hard to be sure exactly what is going on. Firstly, Naomi says to Ruth, "I need to seek some security for you, so that it may be well with you." Since Ruth had insisted on returning with Naomi, however, their fortunes were intertwined. Was Naomi's motivation entirely altruistic? Or was she thinking that her own well-being could only be guaranteed when Ruth was accepted and settled in the community? As for what Naomi tells Ruth to do, it certainly makes Ruth vulnerable, even if the detail is uncertain. When Naomi tells Ruth to uncover Boaz's feet and lie there, is she instructing Ruth to look like a servant at the feet of her master? Or is feet a euphemism, and Naomi is encouraging Ruth to have sex with Boaz? Is the plan that Boaz will be trapped into a relationship with Ruth? And whatever Naomi's intention, is she taking the risk either that Boaz will take advantage of Ruth, or that he will shame her before the community? Whatever Naomi's aim was, there was plenty that could go wrong, and Ruth was in line to suffer most. Somehow, despite all the opportunities for things to go awry, by the end of the chapter it looks like there could be good news for Naomi and Ruth. Boaz awoke and managed to avoid all the possible negative responses. When Ruth said, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin," Boaz praised Ruth for the quality of chesed, a Hebrew word whose root meaning is to do with kindness, but which has a wide range of uses. The English translations vary here. Some have Boaz commending Ruth's loyalty, kindness, faithful love, and so on. Chesed can refer to God's loving kindness for his covenant people, but it is also used of the way that human beings are disposed to one another or to God. It sometimes means piety or adherence to God's commandments, and Boaz's explanation here suggests that it is Ruth the Moabite's observance of Jewish custom and law that earns her Boaz's favour. In effect, he says, "You could have sought any man for a husband, someone better looking than I, someone younger or richer, but you didn't. You came to me, because among us it is normal for a widow to marry her late husband's nearest male relative. And you think that I am that person. Actually, I'm second in line. But if the bloke before me doesn't want to care for you, I certainly will." Boaz is not stupid. He recognises the harm that would be done if Ruth and he were seen to have slept together, so he instructs her to leave before daylight. He also recognises the good in Ruth, the chesed, which is a feature of divine and human relationships at their best. When he looked at Ruth, he could have seen a foreigner, someone from a cursed people, deserving to be a slave at very best. He could have seen a parasite, or even a whore, or a cog in the wheel of a deceitful trap. Boaz saw, and perhaps chose to see, the good before him, rather than the bad. Ruth leaves with a generous portion of barley, so she and Naomi can be confident that Boaz means well for them. For us, Boaz means a challenge to look for the good that is being done, even in the midst of immorality and questionable values. While the gospel demands that we seek justice for those who have been ill-treated, or who lack the opportunities that others can take for granted, it also asserts that there is the possibility of good in all. To see what is wrong, to criticise, and to complain are easy. To commend what is right, and to praise what is good, in the midst of the imperfect, is harder. This is not only true when we are considering statues of bygone philanthropists whose money was made in the slave trade. It is also true in the people we live among today and in the everyday actions that we observe. How often might we catch ourselves being critical when we could instead look for the signs of loving kindness that might inspire our own action? The story of Naomi, Ruth and Boaz is not yet complete. There are still hurdles to overcome and a conclusion that has not yet been hinted at. That's for next week. Let us go into this week with renewed determination to provide the positive for people to see and to look for the same in others. Amen.